It all began on what seemed to be just another tranquil Sunday morning, the kind that felt warmly routine, filled with gentle conversations and the comforting familiarity of my mother's voice. I was thousands of miles away, video chatting as she proudly showed me the beautiful roses she'd nurtured meticulously for over 3 decades in her suburban garden. It was her pride and joy, a serene corner of peace and accomplishment. But that tranquility shattered abruptly with the shrill, authoritative voice of a stranger cutting sharply through our conversation. "Excuse me, but those roses clearly violate Section 8.2 of the HOA bylaws." I watched through my screen, startled and intrigued, as my mother's hands began to tremble, revealing a woman standing aggressively beside her, Patricia Wheeler, a neighbor we'd barely noticed before, wielding a measuring tape like some petty dictator. My curiosity quickly turned to confusion and concern. Who exactly was Patricia Wheeler, and why had she taken such a bizarre and obsessive interest in my mother's beloved garden? The sheer absurdity of roses being precisely half an inch too close to the sidewalk stirred something in me. A mix of bewilderment and growing suspicion. Patricia's smug smile, as she triumphantly announced herself as the new HOA president intent on restoring standards, raised more questions than it answered. Was this really about neighborhood aesthetics, or was something deeper and more troubling at play? Initially, I considered this incident a minor nuisance, easily resolved with my financial resources. After all, managing a successful tech company meant a few petty fines were insignificant. Yet, the uneasy feeling lingered. Patricia's aggressive precision, her intense focus on our home, and the oddly specific nature of her accusations all hinted that this conflict might escalate beyond simple rule enforcement. My curiosity deepened further as I began to question. Why was Patricia targeting my elderly mother specifically? And what drove her relentless obsession? Little did I realize that unsettling moment marked the beginning of an extraordinary journey into a world far more sinister than minor garden infractions, a world filled with hidden motives, deep-seated corruption, and secrets worth far more than the price of a few roses. Patricia Wheeler had unknowingly awakened a determination within me to uncover what lay beneath her peculiar obsession. And soon, I would discover truths that would change not just my mother's life, but our entire community forever. Within days of Patricia Wheeler's initial confrontation, her obsessive enforcement of HOA rules transformed from irritating intrusions into relentless persecution. Each morning became a cruel ritual, with Patricia parading down the street, ruler and camera in hand, meticulously documenting the smallest, most insignificant details of my mother's property. Her neatly pressed beige pantsuit seemed to embody authority, as she spent disproportionate amounts of time scrutinizing every flower, every ornament, and every inch of our family home. Conflict simmered, tension mounting with every step she took toward our doorstep. Patricia's harassment quickly escalated from garden measurements into more personal, hurtful territory. She deemed my late father's lovingly installed vintage mailbox non-compliant, without a hint of remorse, demanding immediate removal. Soon after, Mom's cherished wind chimes, small tokens that brought joy and gentle melodies, were abruptly labeled as noise pollution. Patricia's cold, indifferent gaze never softened, even as my mother's arthritis-stricken hands struggled to keep pace with her impossible demands. The neighborhood atmosphere turned oppressive. Patricia's crusade became disturbingly public when she posted photos online, calling our beautifully kept garden an eyesore that lowered everyone's property values. Watching Mom cry helplessly over those fabricated posts fueled a deeper anger within me, turning simple irritation into quiet rage. What had started as petty, bureaucratic bullying became outright character assassination, threatening my mother's dignity and reputation. Worse still, Patricia's vendetta expanded. Other neighbors who tried standing up against her relentless campaign mysteriously faced doubled fines and conveniently lotto-wind appeals, sending a chilling message. Resistance was futile. Her presence loomed menacingly over our community, turning neighbors into anxious observers, whispering nervously behind closed doors. Yet Patricia's boldness grew even more audacious. Flyers announced an emergency HOA meeting precisely timed for when I was scheduled to be overseas, a calculated move to exploit Mom's vulnerability. I felt the sharp sting of betrayal, realizing Patricia's targeting wasn't accidental. It was disturbingly deliberate. My heart sank further when I uncovered security footage revealing Patricia trespassing at night, maliciously rearranging Mom's potted plants to falsify infractions the following day. Conflict had escalated beyond mere harassment. It became outright sabotage. Patricia Wheeler had crossed every imaginable boundary, and as tensions reached a boiling point, one thing became unmistakably clear. This was no longer just a neighborhood dispute. This was personal, and Patricia's ruthless obsession demanded action far beyond anything she'd anticipated. Here's your empowering and emotionally charged paragraph, 400 words, highlighting the protagonist's decision to fight back. Standing in the kitchen late at night, the echo of my mother's tearful voice still haunting my thoughts, I felt a surge of determination ignite deep within me. Seeing the woman who raised me with such unwavering love and resilience reduced to tears by Patricia's relentless bullying was a call to action I could no longer ignore. Patricia Wheeler had made one crucial mistake. She'd mistaken my patience for weakness, my calm for complacency. But beneath the quiet exterior of a businessman was a fierce resolve, awakened by injustice and ready to confront it head-on. At first, I'd foolishly believed money alone could fix everything, thinking I could quietly pay off Patricia's absurd fines and make the problem vanish. But as Patricia's cruelty escalated, I realized this wasn't just a problem money could solve. It required courage, strategy, and decisive action. The gloves were off, and the passive, tolerant son Patricia had counted on was now gone, replaced by someone who was done watching from the sidelines. With newfound clarity, I canceled my critical business trip, no longer able to justify prioritizing work over my mother's dignity and safety. Patricia's arrogance had inadvertently sparked a fire in me, fueling my resolve to fight not just for my mother, but for every neighbor silently enduring Patricia's oppression. I quickly mobilized my resources, calling in favors from trusted allies and recruiting top legal minds and seasoned investigators to build a case so solid, Patricia wouldn't know what hit her. As plans took shape, my excitement grew, a potent blend of adrenaline and righteous determination. Each document, email, and piece of footage collected was more than mere evidence. It was the promise of justice, the affirmation that bullying and corruption could be defeated. For the first time since Patricia's harassment began, I saw hope brighten in my mother's eyes, empowering me even further. We weren't victims anymore. We were fighters, reclaiming our dignity and standing tall against cruelty. Patricia had no idea the formidable force she'd unleashed. Her actions intended to break our spirits instead ignited a community-wide movement toward accountability, fairness, and unity. Each step forward intensified my enthusiasm, reinforcing the powerful truth that no amount of money or authority could ever overshadow courage, resilience, and genuine love. The battle ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready, invigorated and inspired, knowing Patricia's reign of terror was about to meet its fiercest challenge yet. Here's your pivotal and dramatic paragraph, 500 words, highlighting the investigation process and significant revelations. The moment I began peeling back the layers of Patricia Wheeler's meticulously constructed facade, I realized we weren't simply dealing with petty garden inspections or misplaced lawn ornaments. Patricia's relentless bullying masked something deeper, something insidiously corrupt that had quietly plagued our community for years. My initial anger transformed into a focused determination, driven by the unmistakable sense that we stood at a critical turning point, not just for my mother, but for our entire neighborhood. It was time to uncover the truth, no matter how dark it might be. Partnering with top-tier private investigators and a respected real estate lawyer, I meticulously combed through every available HOA document, financial statement, and neighborhood complaint ever filed. Patricia's resistance to releasing financial records immediately raised red flags, her desperate attempts to conceal information only fueling my suspicion. With each uncovered detail, the picture became clearer. Patricia wasn't merely enforcing rules, she was rewriting them to suit her own twisted agenda. The investigation quickly turned shocking. My heart raced as I reviewed undeniable proof of Patricia's calculated collusion with her brother-in-law's construction company. She systematically forced innocent homeowners into overpriced contracts for unnecessary repairs, pocketing substantial kickbacks in the process. The audacity of her greed left me momentarily speechless. Elderly couples losing their retirement savings, neighbors taking out loans to fix perfectly good driveways, all to line Patricia's pockets. This revelation wasn't just troubling, it was outright criminal. Yet as we dug deeper, Patricia's abuse of power spiraled further. Security footage, financial records, and alarming witness testimonies painted a disturbing portrait of corruption and exploitation. Patricia had shamelessly embezzled over $50,000 from HOA funds, diverting neighborhood resources toward lavish personal vacations under the guise of imaginary emergency repairs. My pulse quickened with righteous indignation as I held documented proof of her betrayal, proof that would bring her manipulative reign crashing down. The final breakthrough arrived when Patricia's former assistant bravely stepped forward, providing damning emails where Patricia openly bragged about targeting vulnerable residents, intentionally forcing older homeowners out by drowning them in fabricated fines. Reading those words, my resolve crystallized. Patricia wasn't just corrupt. She was actively preying on those least able to defend themselves. This pivotal discovery changed everything, transforming my personal battle for my mother's dignity into a crusade for community-wide justice. Armed with overwhelming evidence, I gathered the HOA board, excluding Patricia, to confront them with the stark reality of her corruption. Their initial disbelief quickly turned to outrage as the magnitude of her crimes became undeniable. For the first time, our previously silent community found its voice, realizing Patricia's corruption was more than isolated greed. It was systemic abuse masked by authority. Standing amidst a mountain of evidence, I felt the weight and significance of this moment profoundly. Patricia Wheeler had no idea the storm she'd unleashed, nor that her unchecked arrogance would become the catalyst for monumental change. This wasn't just an investigation. It was a turning point, a moment when justice finally had the power to rewrite our neighborhood's future for good. Here's your intense, climactic paragraph, 700 words, vividly capturing the dramatic showdown at the HOA special meeting. The community center buzzed with anxious anticipation, the air heavy with unspoken tension as neighbors filled every available seat, whispering nervously among themselves. Patricia Wheeler sat prominently at the front, dressed immaculately as always, clutching her infamous measuring tape as if it were a royal scepter. Her familiar smugness radiated, a mask of self-assured control that was about to crumble spectacularly. From my place near the entrance, boxes brimming with meticulously compiled evidence stacked beside me, I surveyed the crowd. Each neighbor's face told a different story of frustration, unease, or quiet desperation, all victims of Patricia's relentless harassment, unaware that tonight their voices would finally be heard. Patricia stood, clearing her throat loudly to demand silence, instantly projecting authority. "Tonight's emergency meeting," she began theatrically, "addresses severe property violations threatening our beloved community." Her words dripped with feigned concern, yet her eyes flashed triumphantly towards my mother, who sat quietly beside me, gripping my hand tightly. Anger surged through my veins, but I steadied myself, knowing the truth would soon silence Patricia's fabricated drama. As Patricia smugly outlined her latest absurd allegations against my mother's home, roses slightly overgrown, garden gnomes unapproved, and the American flag 2 inches too low, I stood calmly, interrupting her monologue with a measured, assertive voice that echoed throughout the room, instantly commanding attention. "Point of order, Madam President," I called, holding the room's gaze steadily. Patricia faltered briefly, visibly annoyed at being challenged, her grip tightening on her clipboard. "I have significant new information to present." A hush fell sharply over the room, neighbors leaning forward curiously. Patricia, sensing the shift, attempted to wave me off, but the murmurs rising among residents forced her to relent. I stepped confidently to the front, deliberately placing the first box of evidence onto the table. Patricia's expression flickered momentarily, betraying uncertainty, her smugness waning into suspicion. With deliberate calmness, I revealed detailed property maps, pinpointing Patricia's prized rose trellis clearly extending beyond her property line, the very violation she'd so mercilessly prosecuted others for. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Patricia's face paled, eyes wide with disbelief. "But that's just the beginning," I continued steadily, heart pounding but voice firm. Box after box, evidence poured forth. Financial statements displaying blatant embezzlement, security footage vividly capturing Patricia receiving cash kickbacks, and signed affidavits from residents forced into unnecessary, overpriced repairs. Each revelation struck like lightning, illuminating the full scale of Patricia's ruthless exploitation. The meeting room transformed into an emotional battlefield, neighbors visibly shocked, some angry, others devastated to see the depth of betrayal they'd endured unknowingly for years. Patricia's composure shattered. She sprang to her feet, shouting desperately, voice high-pitched with panic. "These accusations are absurd. I've dedicated myself to protecting property values." Her cries fell on deaf ears. Neighbors, emboldened by the incontrovertible evidence, began standing up, one by one, recounting their own experiences. The Christmas lights forcibly removed, beloved basketball hoops dismantled, meticulously tended gardens ripped apart. Voices overlapped, turning the meeting into an emotional catharsis long overdue. Holding my mother's hand tightly, I presented the final, undeniable piece of evidence. Emails showing Patricia gleefully targeting vulnerable elderly homeowners, including my mother, deliberately pushing them out for profit. The crowd erupted, anger boiling over into demands for immediate action. Patricia trembled visibly, cornered and exposed, her polished exterior stripped away to reveal the manipulative bully beneath. With the evidence undeniable, I calmly announced my strategic response, having already purchased enough neighborhood properties to call a special election. My attorneys had drafted new bylaws to ensure fairness and transparency, preventing future abuse of power. Patricia's protests became increasingly frantic, desperate attempts at deflecting blame drowned out by the community's collective voice calling unanimously for her removal. The climactic tension peaked as Patricia, finally defeated, slumped into her chair, realizing her reign of terror was over. But I wasn't finished. Turning to Patricia directly, my voice steady with conviction, I declared firmly. You knew the rules better than anyone, and you used them as weapons. That ends tonight. The room broke into applause, cheers ringing out as Patricia, humiliated and powerless, stormed out, clipboard abandoned in disgrace. This confrontation wasn't merely about confronting corruption. It symbolized a community reclaiming its dignity, unity, and strength. Patricia Wheeler had unknowingly ignited a movement for justice, and tonight's victory was more than personal. It marked the beginning of a profound transformation. Together, we'd stood up, spoken out, and ended tyranny. The battle was over. The community forever changed, stronger, wiser, and finally free. Here's your dramatic and suspenseful paragraph, 400 words, capturing Patricia's legal downfall and consequences. In the tense weeks following the explosive HOA meeting, the wheels of justice turned swiftly, relentlessly closing in on Patricia Wheeler. Each day brought new revelations, as evidence meticulously compiled, financial trails, witness statements, surveillance videos, landed squarely in the hands of investigators from the district attorney's office. The atmosphere buzzed with suspense, neighbors holding their breath as news trickled through the neighborhood, rumors of Patricia's imminent legal reckoning spreading like wildfire. Then came the decisive moment. Patricia was summoned to court, her carefully maintained facade of control dissolving under the harsh lights of justice. Sitting stiffly beside her nervous attorney, her signature polished look replaced by an expression of barely masked fear, Patricia watched helplessly as the prosecution laid bare her astonishing corruption. Gasps echoed through the courtroom as the jury viewed damning footage showing her blatantly accepting kickbacks, her calm confidence replaced by visible panic as each new piece of evidence piled up relentlessly against her. Patricia's attorney struggled frantically, attempting to dismiss charges of embezzlement and fraud as misunderstandings. But the evidence spoke louder than any defense, each document a cold, unyielding testament to her greed. My heart raced in exhilaration, watching Patricia's lies unravel publicly. This wasn't just about personal revenge. It was justice finally prevailing, the tangible defeat of corruption that had victimized an entire community. The judge's voice, firm and unyielding, resonated with finality as he announced Patricia's charges, punctuated by the pounding gavel. Patricia's face drained of color, her eyes wide in disbelief, as the reality of criminal consequences sank in. Neighbors filled the courtroom, silently bearing witness to Patricia's disgraceful fall from power. This moment held extraordinary weight, each sentence spoken a vindication for those who had suffered silently for years. Patricia Wheeler was removed permanently from the HOA, stripped of all authority, and formally charged with multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. The stolen HOA funds were recovered and redirected into neighborhood support programs, helping the very residents Patricia once preyed upon. Watching Patricia escorted from the courtroom by authorities, defeated and humiliated, was both satisfying and deeply cathartic. Justice had been swift and decisive. Patricia's reign of terror was conclusively ended, not through quiet resignation, but by the unyielding, unstoppable force of truth, finally exposed. For Patricia Wheeler, judgment had arrived, and its echoes reverberated through our community as a powerful message. Corruption, greed, and cruelty would never again find shelter here. Here's your uplifting, cheerful paragraph, 400 words, celebrating community renewal and meaningful lessons. With Patricia's reign finally behind us, our community blossomed anew, revitalized by a shared sense of relief and newfound optimism. The streets once filled with tension now echoed with laughter and joyful conversations as neighbors reconnected, reclaiming a neighborhood once overshadowed by fear. Each day seemed brighter, friendlier, with residents gathering happily in gardens and driveways, rediscovering the simple joys of neighborly life without Patricia's oppressive oversight. One of the most heartwarming changes was my mother's flourishing garden, now vibrantly alive, proudly displaying her cherished gnomes, little symbols of victory and resilience. Neighbors frequently stopped by, sharing cheerful comments about how these once targeted ornaments had become beloved community mascots, inspiring others to add their own colorful displays in solidarity. Mom's roses bloomed brighter than ever, drawing admiration and joyful applause instead of criticism. Her garden becoming the heart of neighborhood gatherings and friendly celebrations. But the community's revival went beyond gardens and gnomes. With recovered HOA funds, we established an assistance program dedicated to helping elderly and disabled residents maintain their homes, transforming a symbol of corruption into one of compassion and kindness. Each weekend, groups of volunteers joyfully gathered to repaint houses, repair fences, and plant flowers, making these collective efforts feel more like neighborhood festivals than chores. The spirit of generosity spread quickly, replacing past divisions with unity, laughter, and sincere friendships. The newly elected HOA board now met regularly in meetings filled with warmth and genuine care, swapping homemade cookies and lively conversation instead of issuing violations. The atmosphere was refreshingly collaborative, with every voice welcomed and every concern respectfully addressed. Even formerly silent neighbors found themselves confidently speaking up, inspired by the supportive community environment we'd built together. Most importantly, our collective experience taught us a powerful lesson. True community strength isn't about rules, control, or uniformity. It's rooted in empathy, kindness, and mutual respect. As my mother wisely remarked while sipping lemonade on our porch, sometimes the best revenge is simply making things right. Indeed, rebuilding our community wasn't about dwelling on past grievances, but moving forward together, celebrating our shared values of compassion and unity. Our story became a beacon of hope, inspiring neighborhoods nationwide to reclaim their dignity and joy. What began as one family's fight against injustice became a testament to the transformative power of community and kindness, proving once and for all that the strongest neighborhoods are built not on fear, but on friendship and trust. Here's your reflective and meaningful paragraph, 400 words, tailored thoughtfully to a senior audience, emphasizing the deep, lasting lessons from this story. As our community healed and flourished after Patricia's fall from power, the story of our victory spread far beyond our quiet suburban streets, sparking meaningful conversations in neighborhoods across the country. Reflecting upon this journey, especially as we enter the later stages of life, one powerful truth resonates deeply. Justice and dignity should never depend on age, wealth, or influence, but rather on courage, compassion, and unity. For seniors especially, this story underscores a reassuring lesson that even when we feel most vulnerable, our voices, experiences, and strength can still profoundly impact our communities. We learned, often through difficult moments, that silence in the face of injustice can unintentionally empower those who exploit vulnerability. Standing up, however challenging, is essential, not only for ourselves, but for those around us who may not be able to advocate for themselves. My mother, though initially frightened and overwhelmed, became a powerful symbol of resilience simply by refusing to surrender her dignity. Her quiet strength encouraged others to rediscover their own voices, creating waves of positive change felt far beyond our community. Another significant lesson is the profound value of community connections and friendships, especially as we grow older. When Patricia's bullying tactics isolated neighbors, our community fractured, losing its warmth and mutual support. Yet, when we stood together, we quickly discovered that kindness, empathy, and cooperation could heal even the deepest divides. Investing in our relationships with neighbors, offering kindness, support, and friendship, is not merely pleasant. It's deeply transformative and necessary to build the communities we wish to leave for future generations.